Make sure to check out all of our authors on social media. You can find links to their profiles in the description box. Make sure to follow so you don't miss any bookish updates.
All right, so we are back for part 2 of our fangirling episode about A Court of Thorns and Roses. We're talking about the whole series. And if you watched the part 1, you know we're not super far into it. We have only just glossed the surface of really the first 2 books and then some of the overarching themes. So we're going to jump into that. My name is Amy Prokopis. I am the author of the young adult science fiction novel, The Arena, which came out in last March. And my next book, the urban fantasy, Guardians of the Sixth Gate, comes out in October at Halloween. So you can read it. It's kind of spooky for spooky vibes. And again, for part 2 with me today, we have Erika Einfalt, my fellow teacher friend and Sarah J. Maas fan. So we left off, man, we really went on a tangent. We went in deep with some themes. We talked about the family dynamics between Farah, her sisters, Nesta and Elaine, and their father. We talked a lot about how the different sisters feel and interpret their circumstances. And we also, where we left off, we were talking about the love triangle, and mostly we were talking about the love triangle as it occurs in the first 2 books, because in book 1, as we talked about, we have Farah and Tamlin, and it's shown to us how they're falling deeply in love as she's integrating into this society and this court. And we don't see any other reason to believe that they're not going to be together until the very, very end under the mountain, when we have Reese, who's introduced, and she's forced to a degree into these circumstances where she feels like Reese is the bad guy. And we find out very quickly that Reese is actually trying to make the best out of her situation. And he himself is bound by dark forces. And so we have the 2 of them that collide in book 2, and we start to see how Tamlin and Farah's relationship wasn't really all what it was chalked up to be. And so we talked about maybe potential emotional abuse, and how, looking back on the first book, it's pretty obvious, and how some people on TikTok thought it was so obvious that they weren't a good match. And I definitely see that looking back, because you get a lot of that in book 2, where the court starts to intervene in their almost marriage. Suddenly there's all these stipulations to what she can and can't do, how she has to dress. And I think that was when we first saw the discussion about how it's really uncommon for them to have children at all. Was that where that first entered?
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe
they have children a lot less frequently.
Yeah.
And this is something I think it's talked about in book 3.
I think so.
But they only have periods twice a year, but they're horrible. It's all 6 months in one. So it only happens twice a year instead of every month. So apparently that's also a thing that could probably be why they don't have kids that often.
Yeah, maybe they're just not. Yeah, the likelihood of conceiving would be lower if you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that so odd? I love that she brought that in.
I think,
I'm thank you.
Because it explains how important children are to this society. And that brings a lot more because there were some descriptions. I think it was one of her not servants, but it was one of the women that help Farah in the court, and I think it was her son had been killed. I think it was
her brother. It's
it was a brother. It was
her brother and sister. So it's her nephews, but
you're
Alice.
right.
So it's Alice is Farah's almost handmaiden.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yes.
The first and beginning of the second book. So she helps her get dressed, does her hair. And she's technically considered a quote unquote lesser fairy. And so I think it's her sister and brother, but one of them is an in-law.
I think you're right, because I remember the thing about like a nephew. And so I think it was really smart of Sarah J. Maas to include all of that about like having babies and like fertility to a degree, because it adds to the severity of that situation of like how really terrible it is. I mean, it's always terrible when
because
young
Amarantha killed a bunch of winter court kids. There was like 21 kids that Amarantha just decided to slaughter from the winter court, which was bad.
It adds a different meaning to it. I mean, it's tragic anyway. It's really tragic. But when you consider like the societal implication of that, like your population for like the next wave of adults might be a whole lot lower because of war, essentially. And so like that would be a huge blow to society. So it adds a different kind of severity to the situation when we get into like the conflict between those two nations of people, or fae. Yeah. The idea of like the lesser fae is interesting too. You mentioned that, and I went, that didn't get a ton of time in the books, but it definitely got woven in like a lot.
Yeah, and it wasn't really ever discussed. Like they do talk about having humans as slaves and how that was like the reason for the war 500 years before this story started. But and I'm assuming like the lesser fairies that are employed are paid, because it doesn't really ever talk about that. But I'm surprised that, I don't know, lesser fairies, it's interesting.
I know. It is,
but
it is really strange.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, slightly off topic, and it
as we tend to be.
It goes back to some of like the emotional like trauma that Under the Mountain caused for Tamlin and Feyre, and kind of the difference between Tamlin and Rhys. But I just find it so interesting that, you know, Tamlin does all this stuff, like restricts where she can and can't go just to protect her. But then when she is having extreme nightmares in the middle of the night, he does absolutely nothing to comfort her. And at one point, Feyre even kind of makes an excuse saying, well, if, you know, if we deal with it, then we let Amarantha win or something. And I really think she's just making up excuses for why he's not being more comforting. And then you get Rhys, who, when Feyre moves to Valaris, because, you know, she is rescued from the Spring Court, you know, she doesn't have nightmares as often, first of all, but when she does, like Rhys's reaction to that. And
you're right. Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out like where the line is, because I understand not wanting to let someone who did so many horrible things control your life. But also I feel like that Tamlin didn't do anything, and she really didn't for him either. I feel like it's very like neglectful. I don't know. There's just some like, I don't understand how they heal, I guess.
It is. Yeah. I kind of forgot about the nightmares, honestly, but you're right, because she did have all those nightmares after, and he wasn't super receptive to comforting her at all. And in the last half, and you're right, in the beginning of A Court of Mist and Fury, we see all her nightmares. We definitely see her attempting to make the relationship work. And it's really kind of one-sided. She's putting in this work to make it all, to try and make things better. And she starts doing some of that like mental gymnastics about like, well, this is the way I feel, like about if we deal with it, we let her win kind of thing. I think you're right. Maybe she is kind of making excuses to attempt to like rationalize the way, like the reactions she's getting from him. maybe I'm just not remembering the beginning of that super, super well, but I don't remember it ever coming to a head between her and Tamlin, where they had the discussion where she ever expresses that she thinks he's being unfair. I don't remember ever seeing a
She never
discussion.
talked to them about it. And I think that's a big part of their relationship is like,
Yeah, there was
don't
never a
communication.
conversation.
And when they do, their communication sucks. Like it turns so angry and aggressive so quickly. Just like after Under the Mountain, like
Yes.
Farrah's fed up, like she's a fae now. She could handle herself before as a human, but now she's fae, so she's fed up. Tamlin's like, why will she not shut up and stop asking? So, you know, and then Rhys comes in and he's like, yeah, you can go with me to on this errand
Why
after
not?
they rescue her, and everything is her choice. And I
Yeah.
think she just has so much more freedom, you know, there's not nearly as much aggressive control.
They're for sure on an equal plane, the two of them. Not that they're necessarily like equal in their like positions at court per se, but their relationship and the like opinions and consideration that went into the decisions that we then see going into like the war with the next two books, we definitely see that she's being included and considered just as like seriously in those decisions despite her role at court. So
well, and I think a lot of that has to do from when the mating bond snaps into place, which I don't remember exactly. I think it's in Mist and Fury, right? In book 2.
I think so. Yeah. Whether that solidifies, because at the end of Mist and Fury is where we get that like sneaky hint about the secret. Was that in the next one? The marriage.
That is,
I thought it was at the end of Court and Mist and Fury and then into the next one, right? Because she's going back to Tamlin.
She does go back to Tamlin, and it is so funny how Lucian immediately picks up that like,
he knew
immediately. So I think what happened was, I think at the end of book 2 is when they go to Highburn to try and destroy the cauldron. And when, gosh, there's so much left in book 2. I could be wrong about
Look at this.
I know
it's a whole thing by itself, because we haven't even talked about like why these books are so like why people immediately pick them up, because this book is so steamy. We haven't even discussed like the reason people are buying these books.
Well, and I think that's a huge like testament to how good they are, is that we can have all of these conversations about deep and very serious topics like emotional abuse, neglect, like caste systems, relationships, stuff like that, like sister dynamics, because I mean, really, there's not that many steamy scenes in the first one, like maybe 3.
Yeah.
Really not that like smutty, you know, it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's a couple of them, especially like in this one and a few in the next one that are like.
Book 2 is for sure more steamy.
Oh man, yes. And that's definitely like what you see a lot of the discussion being online is because like, oh, they said this word in that scene. Oh my gosh. And it's what I think leads people to pick it up. But the only reason that people are finishing these whole like brick, they're huge. The whole series is because I think of those relationship dynamics, and they're serious issues. And this world is so vastly different from our own. I mean, we're not even talking about humans here. We're not even talking about humans. The humans are like their own thing often, like, and they're like mentioned, but it's like, oh, the like humans are over there. But we can still relate to so many of these discussions. I mean, I talked about my emotionally abusive relationship already. We talked about sister dynamics and family things. Everyone's got that. The love dynamic for sure, and even like the social hierarchy about being a lesser fae, it's so thought out, the world building in these books, that it makes it, there's so many different things that you can discuss because it's deeper than just the
It's the
story
whole
we're being
world.
told. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why
And
you can
I don't
spin
really
off
know
anything.
how people do that. Like,
Yeah.
I am not a writer. I don't think I ever could be, honestly. And I think that was one thing from reading your book that I was like, oh my God, I know somebody that was able to build this whole world and these characters that seem like real people and these situations that are like culturally relevant. And I'm like, how the hell do you put a story like this together and not miss things? Like it
It's
just
a
like
lot of,
blows my mind, you know? I don't think I could ever do that.
oh man, it's world building. Like in the writing world, there are so many like classes and like instructional manuals, even just about world building, because that's what makes the story good, right? I mean, anyone can tell you a story and anyone can tell you like an action-packed story and it can still be entertaining, but to make it like encompass your entire like thought process about the world you're in and make you feel like you're in it and not just being told it, that takes so much time. I feel like, especially for fantasy, that's why a lot of fantasy books are so long, like these are, and why fantasy authors, I mean, like the first one that comes to mind is George R.R. Martin, because people are still waiting on some of his books. But
I don't
that's
think it's never gonna happen.
I know at this point, really, but I think it takes so long to do it well because you've got to sit with the characters and learn them as people, and you need to know things about them and their like decision making past what will ever end up into the story. That way you feel depth when you like read these people, and we definitely see that. I think one character that we don't see a lot and that the fan base is asking for spin-offs on, Lucian. You could do so much with him, and there's such a feeling that there's like, because he's kind of like this stoic character, like he sees what's going on, but we don't hear a ton from his point of view much at all. But you can just sense that he has so much knowledge and that he's been through so many things, and you don't see it yet, but it makes him feel like this real person standing there within all these conflicts. So that's
well, I feel like at least in
the
first book, beginning of the second, he's a lot of times Tamlin's voice of reason. Which is kind of it. He is who the readers get like their how they should feel about a situation from. So, you know, when Tamlin won't let her go off and ride to another village, whatever. You know, and Tamlin's like, well, I'll talk to him, like, let's see, or training's a good example.
The training, yes, we haven't even, that was a whole thing that we haven't
Tamlin like letting Feyre train.
Yes.
And Tamlin's like, no, because it puts off this, you know, viewpoint that we're not safe. And he's like, just let her train. So it's almost like the readers can take a cue from him, like, this is what side you should be on. Because you know what side Feyre's on. But now you're also getting an outside point of view where somebody else is saying, Tamlin, you're not being rational or fair, you know? And so it's almost like,
maybe that's where the tipping point is. We keep talking about this tipping point between a love triangle where we tip to Rhys's side. Maybe Lucian helped as far as like reading goes. Maybe those scenes where we get more of his opinion, maybe that's helping tip to that direction. Maybe it's not so much between the love interests as it is the people around them shaping that view of the relationship. Maybe it's more of an outside influence that we are seeing that makes us gather those opinions.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I just thought of that is, again, sort of a tangent, but talking about Rhys, so you read the first book, they first meet at Calanmai. His first words to Feyre are, oh, there you are, I've been looking for you. And it's not a lie. And so my favorite thing is going like when you get to the point where like they're mates, he's like, I was looking for you at Cal and Maya. I somehow knew you were going to be there. And I was looking for you. And so and even Feyre, she has a revelation, like as he's talking about this, she's like, oh my God, his first words were, oh, there you are. I've been looking for you. And I'm like,
when we circle around to the ring thing and how that mating bond
yes,
as far as like we're not given a ton of that like tradition right off the bat, but we get to that about the point where she realizes it. We get like, oh, this is kind of like a tradition within our culture and whatnot. And then she's realizing like, oh, I've met that person and I thought that was weird. And oh, he said that to me. And we get that circle back around moment. That's when definitely got the feels.
Well, and one of my things that I loved was when Rhys is kind of helping Feyre start getting a feel for her power. So he takes her to the Weaver's cottage because he needs to know if she is able to like sense objects that are his, right? And again, that comes up again when they're trying to break into the Summer Court's like vault where his half of the book is. But so she's able to like tell the spells basically that she's him and like to let her through. So it comes back, but you know, he sends her into the Weaver's cottage to look for this object of his. He doesn't tell her what it is. She just has to feel for it. And she comes out, she's like, are you freaking kidding me? It's a ring. And then you find later on that his mother put the ring there as a test for Rhys's future bride. And you're like, oh my gosh, what?
Oh, that was perfect. That was so like, perfect.
Rhys's mom was really a goat. Like she
knew she was
that. She made all of Feyre's gowns. Like she made all of his dresses like before like probably even born. But somehow like, I mean, think about it. We're probably like the same like height and build. And I guarantee you we could not both wear, like if I had a dress that fit me like a glove, it probably would not fit you like a glove, and like vice versa.
So because it's
fact that his mom somehow knew exactly. I'm like, oh my gosh, Rhys's mom.
Oh man,
she's the best. So there's just so many like full circle moments and little like moments that you're meant to fangirl over. And I think that's why it works so well. Like this book was written to be obsessed about, you know, it wants you to remember the things from book one and all of like those random little quotes or events and stuff like that. It's wild.
Those books, they're almost, I mean, they are like their own books, but you could almost have called one part one and one part two, because when you put the whole series together and you like the way we are right now and we're talking about it, you end up talking about these two books regardless of which one you're talking about. You end up about them together.
I think a lot of that is because the end of book one kind of trails into the beginning of book two.
Yeah, it was done beautifully too.
The beginning of book two, like the first third of it, is another preface.
Yep.
No, so
you're right, because these two, the next two definitely go together, and that last book is its own. You could almost, I mean, if like a friend had told you about this world enough, you could almost read Silver Flames completely by itself and would understand a lot of it. Aside from some of those character things you wouldn't have as much depth in. Well, but it's so different than the rest of these.
And I would even say that like 3 could be its own thing.
Yeah.
And 4 in my head is basically just a bridge. There's no
different,
like there's no aggressive
it's
like
no,
well, not like aggressive like conflict. There's really, this is gonna sound bad and I don't mean it in this way. There's not like a very strong plot line. All I see book 4 as is, hey, these are these characters you love, and you get to see a bit into their life, like after they, you know, defeat Hybern and live happily ever after. But it also helps you transition to Silver Flames and it sets up Nesta's struggles.
Yeah,
so
you're right. we start to see like not soft per se, but we start to see a different perception of Nesta a bit in this book. So it makes sense that would be a setup for the next one. I bought all of these.
A bridge, you know?
It is a bridge.
1, 2, and 3, you got the bridge, and then you got 5.
And you have the last one, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I see it. Like,
I think so too.
I was not a huge fan of Frost and Starlight.
I wasn't at first either.
But I think it's necessary. I think it's definitely necessary.
I agree with that. So I bought all of these books from my local bookstore. Support your local bookstore. And I bought them like almost all at once. I bought them in like 2 at a time. So I bought these 2 together. And the bookseller actually said that she hadn't finished the series. So she had only gotten like a third of the way in. She hadn't read this one yet at all. And she said that when she was looking for the series online to add them to the bookstore, she said a lot of people don't even include this one.
That one's like
more of a novella.
Goodreads. Like instead of 4, it's 3.1, and then Silver Flames is 4.
Back up again,
Yeah, so it's very odd. And I've actually talked to her about that, like, because I know what bookstore you went to and I know who you talked to.
Oh, yes.
And so she and I have had the exact same conversation. Because I went in there at one point to buy them and she was out of stock at the time. She was like, I know, somebody just bought them. So she was reordering. But
I think for time's sake, because we could talk about this forever. So I think we're going to have to start leaning towards the end of the series. So I think we should, because we definitely have feelings about this one.
I feel like we need to do a third exclusively for number 5 personally.
I mean,
in a couple months we can.
You might have to,
and I'll have reread it by then. So
that's true, I would have too. So I think we talked about that before we even got started with part 1 of this episode or this series. We were talking about A Court of Silver Flames right off the bat, because I think that might be my favorite in the series. And it's not told, it's told from a different point of view from the rest of the series. We see Nesta, Farrah's sister, and we don't even see Farrah very much. We see her right at the end when Prince Hamlin make their big announcement. And then there's all these her and Reese, no! Oh my gosh. But when I know, oh my gosh.
I can't believe you just did that.
I know, we just talked about him being so terrible too. Oh, I'm terrible.
Oh, that's really funny. Sorry.
But we do see them a little bit when the 2 of them make their announcement about the children thing circles back around. And suddenly we see Farrah a little differently, because now she's potentially in danger due to childbirth complications. And so we see
there's a whole different,
there's like a whole episode between that
too.
Yeah,
because a lot of people were like, why would this is basically just preview for part 3 in a couple months.
Why
would Reese lock Nesta in the House of Wind if that's exactly what Tamlin did to Farrah? And he rescued her from that. And so I actually have read like a whole Reddit thread about that. And there are some really good points made that we could spend an hour on, like, easily. And it's really interesting to see Cassian and Nesta's viewpoint of, these 2 characters that we've grown to love so much. And we have realistically, Reese is very morally gray, right? But we don't necessarily see them do a whole lot of bad. It's all for
some kind of cause. It's all for the betterment of something, even if it's not morally gray is the best way to put it. Even if it's not like the nicest thing per se to do, it's
like stealing from the summer court.
Yeah, it's the best of the it's maybe the best situation. It's choosing, making the best out of a bad situation. It's like the train scenario, like you can make the train go one way and kill this amount of people, or go this way and kill more. But they're all kids, some kind of Either way, it's not a great decision.
Yeah, but there are some really good, like, I do love book 5, and I do think either that or Mist and Fury are my favorite.
Me
but
too.
I mean, I obviously love book 5 because literally every other chapter is like spicy.
That is very true. And
which I am really here for.
There's more of that. If you're looking for a spicy book, and we already talked about, you could almost read book 5 without reading the others if you knew enough about the others per se to get like the worldview. But there's definitely more like spiciness in book 5 than I would even say in A Court of Mist and Fury. We're seeing a lot of, it's not graphic necessarily, but we're seeing a lot more interesting like scenes between the two intimately. They're not all just like, oh, sex happens, it's like how it goes about interaction.
I love that, like, at the same time that all this is happening, Cassian is also training Nesta. And so he's not, he's seen her at her lowest point. He's dealt with her at her lowest point. And yeah, he knows she's a pain in the ass and like it makes him angry sometimes. Yeah. But he gets to see this person that he always has feelings for. Granted, those feelings aren't always positive a lot of times because he is so fed up with her most of the time, like early on, but he always feels something, and I think it's just really cool to see Nesta grow into herself, them grow from like these bickering, fairies into somewhat friends. And it's such a good, I don't know, it's such a good book.
I think what I like about their relationship, Nesta and Cass, what I like about their relationship versus Rhys and Farah is that it's not about them together so much as it is about them apart. Which I really enjoyed. Like you said, we see Nesta grow a lot. We see her grow a ton. And so and even though we're getting both of their viewpoints, it's still largely her story.
Most people don't not remember, but like, I talk about it. 90% of people talk about
Nesta
being the main character.
Yeah.
But I think it's also because everything revolves around her in that story.
I think so too. But it's nice. It's really nice to read a romance that's not, even though it's like we get some really intense sex scenes and we definitely see intensity between them. We see all the typical romantic tropes.
Yeah.
Like we see everything, even down to like a ball, a dance together. But it's still so different from like a romance novel because it's about their individual growth as people. Almost more than it is about like the romance between the two, because for so long they were just lovers.
Yeah.
It was like this resistance about being together.
Yeah, it was literally just sex for so long.
For so long. And so I think I kind of liked that in a lot of ways, not just because it made it more like
forced. It made it feel more realistic because I feel like a lot of it's changed, how people get together. Used to, it was you dated and then you got married and then you had sex, and now it's just like you live your life and you have sexual partners. And so it felt very realistic because you also got to see struggles. Like, people aren't perfect. Farah has a great story and the first books are great, but a lot of times like that relationship just has everything fall into place. So I love the discord and the struggle and the like, you have to push to make it work. So overall, they're all great though. I do love them.
They're very different romances. So they're both very good, but they're very different romances. So we are yet again down to a minute left. I agree with you though. We could totally talk just about book 5 because there are so many discussions that happen in it. So let me know in the comments if all of you guys listening would be interested in seeing just a book 5 discussion because I would love to have one. But thank you so much, Erika, for joining
Thank
me.
you. I loved it. It's been really fun. I'm gonna go binge read now. It's great.
I know. I need to you talked me into it. I might have to reread them.
You should.
I think that's it. I don't want to get cut off. I got cut off as the last guest. But I'll talk to you later. I'll see you very soon.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this was so fun.
Yay. All right.
Bye.
Bye.